start and do it scared, because if I didn't try the marathon, if I didn't grow a business and quit my job and do that, I wouldn't have had all of these experiences. And I always say that, like, I've been waiting around for like my life to start, and I don't want to feel that way. I want to be able to say that, like, if anything happened, I left it out all on the table. And I truly do that with like traveling and bucket list goals all the time.
Let's link up with Krista on the Fix. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
What's up, Fix listeners? Welcome back to our latest episode of the Fix podcast. I'm your host, Krista Huber. You're in for a treat with today's guest, Kelly Ann Parker, who I literally just met like not even a month ago through a networking group that has in-person events that I haven't even had the chance to go to yet, but we met virtually. Saw that she had a really amazing backstory with growing a business, selling her business, and I just wanted to learn more about her. That led to a really quick Google Meet, and I said, I have to have you on this podcast. She is inspiring as a female founder, as someone who thinks outside of the box, as somebody who really has been able to create the reality for herself that she always wanted. And we talk a ton about the art of pivoting, of going after everything you want, as you'll hear at the very end of the episode, spoiler alert. Her best advice is to just start and just go for it. Kelly sold her corporate gifting company to Urban Stems, now currently has a business-to-business coaching business, and she helps anybody in any stage of entrepreneurship, even if it's just a curiosity of, hey, what does it take to own my own business? What could it look like? What could it feel like? So if she resonates with you in any way, if there's anything about her, and I can guarantee that everyone who listens to this is going to feel this way, that makes you just kind of say, hey, I want to learn more, reach out to her. Her LinkedIn and ways to contact her down in the show notes. There's a lot in here about taking care of your health. And as a female, making sure that you are keeping your health at the top of your list and really prioritizing that as your non-negotiable. And of course, that aligns times a million with our mission here at the Fitness Fix and what we stand for, and everything I try to lead as an example, but also instill in our clients that I'm so grateful to work with every single day. So with that, let's welcome Kelly to the Fix podcast. Welcome to the Fix podcast. I am so excited to have you, Kelly. After us meeting just with a quick Google Meet, we were like, there's so many topics that we could touch on, so many things to talk about. So honestly, I'm excited for this to go in multiple directions and just have the Fix listeners get to know, and me have the opportunity to highlight such an incredible female who's done really cool things, who's doing really cool things, and talking about your perspective, your mindset, your health through your entire journey as an entrepreneur. So thank you first and foremost for your time, for being here. And as a little icebreaker question, we were just talking about drinks. I'm going to ask you, what is your go-to coffee order?
Oh, this is easy. I'm just black iced coffee, maybe a splash of skim milk, and that's
Nice.
it.
Nice and
I'm
simple.
really a classic girl. I gave up sugar and coffee in college, and now when I taste it, I can't go back. So I'm a simple, just black coffee with a few ice cubes, but never hot coffee.
That's what I was just going to ask. Are you a no matter the weather, it's iced kind of girl? Me too.
At 100%, 365. Can't.
It could literally be like -10, and I'm like, iced coffee it is.
I was recently at an event at the Standard Hotel, and the man who was hosting the banquet, like the banquet coffee barista, saw me go back into a public ice bucket, scoop some ice out to put in my coffee, and he was like, no, I'll make you one. Like, please don't ever do that. And I was like, well, also respectfully, please don't ever serve me hot coffee.
Yeah, exactly. And I love you taking matters into your own hands.
Exactly. When are we going to get the, iced coffee first, people? But anyway.
Yeah. Right. Like, why can't that be the default? I feel like we've got to move in that direction for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely one thing I could get behind.
Me too, girl. Me too. Well, cool. So now that we already established that we have some things in common, girl after my own heart, I want to go right into the deep, hard hitting question. There's tons of podcasts out there. There are so many people you can listen to. There are lots of entrepreneurs out there. Apparently, my dog's going to be a part of the
Oh,
feature today.
I love an extra guest. As long as
um,
it's a fuzzy extra guest, I'm
she
okay with it.
is. She is. She has her designated spot on the couch. But why should the Fix listeners, why should anybody listening to this who maybe even new to this show, why should they continue to press play? Why should they care about what you have to say? And in answering this question, I'd love for you to really take the angle of who are you at your core versus giving us like the resume version of Kelly, because we'll get into the resume part later.
Yeah, of course. I think for me, as an entrepreneur, I'm, someone who's really built my business from the ground up. So I always say like B2B KP, which is the name of my company now, is Business to Business by Kelly Parker. And it's really entrepreneur coaching with no bullshit. I teach founders how to launch, grow, and exit their companies from the perspective of someone who did exactly that. There's a lot of, coaching on the internet or different, opportunities to download a course and learn, but you learn by doing. And I have a lot of experience of doing that.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm able to, kind of pass that torch on. And it's honestly been one of the greatest highlights of not just my career, but of my personal life to be able to help so many other founders bring their dreams to life and support other female founders doing that too.
Amen. And the no bullshit piece is so much a part of my value system as an individual, but also as a coach when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to fitness, when it comes to helping women really understand that you do have the time, you can have the good relationship with food. You don't have to say no to the drinks, the social events, whatever it is that you thought you had to put restrictions on. And you also don't have to say no to taking care of yourself when you're a busy person. So I really love that. And I just want to underscore, as somebody who's grown an online business, I've been in situations where I didn't necessarily have the best coach advising me on what to do. And personally, I really relate to your sentiment around working with somebody who's done it, because I just don't think there is a trade for that kind of experience. And the way that we met was through another networking group. And I just saw you post about the type of business you created and how you kind of shifted. So to bring the Fix listeners up to speed on that, just talk to me about your origin story of how you got into corporate gifting, which eventually led to your exit with a sale with Urban Stems, which is just incredible.
Thank you. Yeah. It's such a funny full circle story. I think I inherited the entrepreneurial spirit and bug from my own mom. She worked in corporate America in, Manhattan for telephone companies and so on. But in the 90s, she had a small business flower and gift shop.
So
And
cool.
yeah, as a side hustle. And it was only open a few years, but I knew that, she really wanted to be a business owner. And I, like many people, excelled in certain classes in school and really struggled in others. And I found that the education system didn't really work for someone like me because I get straight A's in the classes that I loved, like English and history or anything storytelling, right? And then I really struggled
Mm.
in science and math that was numerical, like really, really struggled. And what happened for me right out of college was I was able to join startups, right? Where you're able to kind of build and every day is different and you're able to learn operational skill sets that are outside of like the best, the things that you already have. And it's just the best learning experience. And I felt like, yes, my education set me up for entrepreneurship, but really working in startups just elevated that. And it came full circle on my journey in startups when I was sending gifts all the time. So I used to have to send gifts to clients, and I was actually really thoughtful in the process, like, of what my clients would want, right? Like if someone was having a baby, I would make sure I would put together a nice baby gift of all different things that they would need, or if they were going on a trip. And that spirit really came from my mom, right? I knew flowers and gifting from her. And
Mhm.
then I had like my educational background of being the first college graduate in my immediate family and that structure.
Yeah.
And then the structure of startups. So kind of all three came full circle. And I was like, I'm ready to take the leap, right? I have these three pillars of what could be a company. And I started it with $5,000 to my name and I just kept going. I really just built it on cold email and started to network and was able to acquire some customers and build it out until it was eventually acquired in 2020.
First of all, so inspiring. And I love that you can trace that back to your mom. But what I also want to highlight what you said, and I'd love for you to expand on this point too, is what allowed you to ultimately really stand out was being so thoughtful. And I'm curious, as you then, you had this idea and you ran with it and you noticed that, right? Like that was like kind of like the seed for you to say, hey, this could turn into my own business. What did that then look like for you when you actually focused on building this corporate gifting company in terms of like, were you researching and diving into like the psychology of why people love feeling like acknowledged in such a personalized way?
I love this question because for two reasons. You'll hear, a lot of people say gifting is my love language or I'm not a good gifter, right? And
Mm-hmm.
what it comes down to is giving people the ability to act on their thoughtfulness, right? So for a sender, like someone that's going to send a gift or buy a gift for someone, it has to be an easy, seamless process where, it's presented nice, packaged nice,
Sure.
you know, and then for a recipient, it has to feel like, it's the only sweater ever made, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it has to be, give emboss that feeling. And in corporate gifting, it's an even harder challenge, right? Because there's an art
Yeah,
and science of gifting, but it also has to be in a professional manner because you wouldn't gift certain things or items
totally.
to a coworker or a potential client or prospect. So I knew a lot about that side of the business because the startup that I was in while I was coming up with my idea,
Mm-hmm.
their core customer was office managers. So I
Okay.
had personally sold our office services platform to over 400 office managers. So I had a Rolodex of office managers. And as I was having natural conversations with them about our products, I was also asking, who do you use for gifting? What type of
Mm,
budgets do you use? What's important to you? And I was just documenting. So I didn't even have to research as much. I
cool.
had already had an audience of people that do buy gifts and buy corporate gifts in bulk. And it was like not competitive at all to the current business that I was
Right.
in because, that was janitorial and office services and this was gifting. So it was just the best of both worlds to really organically learn from my audience before I built it out. And I really just built out exactly what they told me. They wanted gifts that give back, that were sustainable, and were in certain price points. And that's exactly what I did.
Yeah. And I mean, that makes perfect sense. But I think if anybody's listening to this, even as an entrepreneur or somebody who has that like entrepreneurial itch and they just don't know where to go with it, I wish I had heard that story from you for my younger self when I was trying to find that route of pursuing a corporate job, maintaining that corporate job as I kind of like came up with my idea, but even taking that a step further, leveraging my corporate job to be able to turn that into the idea. And I'm curious now in your position, coaching a lot of founders and female founders, especially, how often do you work with women who are in that phase of this is still a side hustle for me and they're trying to navigate that jump? Because I think you and I both know like that's a scary place to be. A lot of people are afraid to do it. But I also think sometimes women, no, you can never wait too long, but it's kind of like, hey, like, if you could think about this in a little bit of a different way, what could you make out of your current situation, especially if you don't love it or you know that it's like not your thing, And, to give a little more context to this, I asked this question because when I think back to my 2.5 year stint of working in finance, and I knew the whole time it wasn't for me, something that I would love, and I give this advice to people trying to grow online fitness businesses, if I could have done something differently at the time, instead of working in the group fitness space in boutique fitness, this was just a timing thing. But I wish that online coaching was more popular, because I could have spent the downtime I had at my corporate job that frankly, like, I just wasn't doing a whole lot, growing my brand instead of someone else's brand for their boutique fitness studio. And I just didn't know any different. And I see younger women doing that today, especially with the nature of remote work, right? And seeing them be able to grow. And as long as their company is supportive of that, of course, even better. But I think that's an opportunity that I wish I could have capitalized on. I still got plenty of other skills, but I'm curious, because you kind of went through that and it almost sounds like it was a little bit by accident. I'm curious, like, what advice and perspective you would give to somebody who might be in that transitionary kind of phase.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned, like, through your own journey, you could pinpoint like what you would have done differently or spent more time at or adjusted, right? And I think we all kind of do that in the moment of like looking back at it.
Sure.
For me, I could have stayed in my job a lot longer. I was a top performer. I had been at the company 3+ years. There was no reason for me to leave, because I could live off my salary and, do that from 9 to 5 and work on my business from,
Sure.
5 to 9 in the evenings. I think for me at the time, I really wanted to dig my teeth into something. It was a pivotal time in my personal life too, where, it kind of felt like everyone's lives around me kept moving forward in different ways. I had friends, move out of New York. I had friends, start families and different businesses and all these things. And I just kept feeling like, okay, I've been in tech startups now for 10+ years. It's my time. Like, it just felt like it was the right time.
Yeah.
So, that's something I identified in my journey, is I could have stayed on a lot longer and given myself a lot more wiggle room financially. But I coach women and, business owners who are currently in full-time jobs, who have recently lost a job,
Okay.
or are transitioning from a maternity leave or an upcoming pregnancy, so on, that are really trying to have the goal of owning a business and a lifestyle business, right? And I think that is, in the venture capital world, no VC ever wants to hear like, oh, it's a lifestyle business, right?
No. And
But
like the lack of tangible pieces of that too. That's keep going, because I want to come back to that point.
yeah, but for a lot of women, like, there is the opportunity to have a very fruitful lifestyle business that
Totally.
allows you to, the freedom of your day, and you can travel, you could, create content, you could be, an active participant in, the daily activities of bringing a child to school and, never missing,
Right.
a baseball game, right? There's like so many more things to a lifestyle business. And the first thing I coach on is, how do we replace the number that you were given, right? So how do you replace the salary? That is the biggest fear, is how quickly can I get you to the number that you were earning? And I think that's the secret sauce. Like, if I am able to do anything for someone, it's how do we get you to that number so that you could still have all the other things in the lifestyle business that we just explained, but you're still earning that number. Or a lot of times they're like, hey, I don't even need to earn that number if I have the time back, right? I'm
Sure.
willing to lower
There's
that.
value on that.
Right. And then I have other people that have other women that only do a side hustle for 10 hours a week and earn more than their full-time job, right? So it's really how the pendulum swings, like you could see. But for anyone that's interested in entrepreneurship or has the idea of a side hustle or wants to start pursuing something, it's always a great time to pursue it while you have an annual salary and health benefits,
Absolutely.
because
Yes.
Once you're in the other side of it, the bills just continue to come.
Yeah, 100%. And I want, you know, this sparked, I have like 5 other questions, but I want to keep going on what you just mentioned about like the lifestyle piece, because I think this is super interesting and you are uniquely positioned to have like two kind of very different opinions on this because of your experience. So on the one side, you built this business, it has a technology focus, there's a very like tangible product slash service that's attached to it, right? And then on the other hand, we're talking about this lifestyle component. And let's just use my business as an example because it falls into the category that you're describing. And something that, like, this could just be a story that I'm telling myself, but you're kind of like underscoring it. And I think you're in a position to probably change the perspective for a lot of people. But you think about venture capitalists and you think about taking on investment and that sort of thing. And I think the typical talk track is like, well, we're going to, as a venture capitalist, we're going to invest in like a physical product or like some service that's like really, really tangible, right? Because maybe you're building software with it or tech or whatever it is. Whereas, like, I don't hear about a venture capitalist company investing in a nutrition coaching business, right? So, do you think that's something that is changing? Like, do you foresee that there are investment style like firms that will focus on this type of audience as a customer, like for themselves? Because I think it's like you freaking go on Instagram and like there's thousands of people like this. I have friends obviously who are my peers in this space who are making, huge businesses, very successful, like they're very successful financially, and their margins are insanely good because there's not really a lot of overhead besides somebody's time, right? So let's like kind of talk the business side of that, and I want your take on that.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I have run the gamut on different size companies and different parts
Yeah.
of their journeys, right? So I've been in early stage startups, pre-seed, pre-series A, all the way to IPO, like
Okay.
listed on Wall Street, companies that if I mentioned the word, anyone would have it
Would
on,
know it. Yeah.
right? Like
Mm-hmm.
100%, they would have that app on their phone. So now in my position of coaching entrepreneurs, I also run the gamut, right? I coach a lot of launchers and solo entrepreneurs and lifestyle businesses that are not investable and are exactly like you said, like they can be 6, 7, even, bigger
Yeah.
businesses. But they are not investable for multiple reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
There might not be anything proprietary to them
Right.
besides their persona and their personality and so on. But there may be opportunities for partnerships and acquisitions and so on down the line with brand deals and so on. So I am seeing content creation and brand deals come about for that pocket of people. I will say I have a portfolio of about 75 different founders here and there. They come and go. Some people have me stay on for projects. Some people just do one-on-one sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the second pocket outside of my solo entrepreneurs and like launchers and founders are these growers who may have received their first check or are now fundraising, right?
Okay.
And they have either a physical direct to consumer e-commerce product,
Okay.
omni-channel product, or are in SaaS, right? They're selling a
Mm-hmm.
technology product to B2B companies. So it really isn't just two different genres of
Yeah.
what's investable and what's not. It's also, like you said, what's tangible and not, right? Like you and I, Mike, I mean, maybe if we write a book or, do
Sure. Good
something else,
example.
like it
Mm-hmm.
would be in Target, but like two of my founders, just this week, like that's what I look forward to on my weekend is like, I can't wait to see their product. It's going to be in Target, right?
So
So like,
cool.
it's a very different thing. And in order for them to scale and take on a contract like Target, they do need venture capital.
Right.
So it's a unique position to be in because I have, gone through the different parts of those businesses.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's good and bad to each. And it really depends on what the founders' mindsets and goals are for themselves and their businesses. It really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, I think the goal piece for them and like how they envision the rest of their life is so key, right? Like, and what's cool is you can give them the perspective, and like naturally somebody who is building something is inclined to think this way, but like you can give them perspective of pivoting. You can give them perspective of how to actually pivot, like how to move in like a slightly different direction, like maybe more vertically versus or horizontally, right? So I think that's really, really, that's probably what makes like this next stage for you with your current business now really fun, because there's variety and it's different. And I want to go back to what you just mentioned about, you know, trying to raise capital and funding, or even some of these people getting that first big check and like where they go next. Let's tie in like the health and mindset and nutrition piece to this. That you don't have to experience that to know that it's probably a very stressful time, that there's a lot going on. So when it comes to your own journey and or your experience with guiding your clients through this, like what is your advice on trying to take care of you when it's pretty easy, when your passion for your work and your business is so huge, to kind of put yourself on the back burner?
So, like I said, everything I coach on and so much of the advice is things that I've gone through, right? And when I was building my business, it was an all or nothing. My
Mhm.
health, mental health, sleep, everything was on the line because I was up against only having $5,000, right?
Right.
So it was like,
Yeah,
it was like, hey, like that's actually not even the cost of living in New York for a month, like for
exactly.
most people. So, how do I survive, right? And there was a time where like I remember just sitting at my laptop for like 14 hours packing orders and like skipping meals and literally eating like sample chocolate bars that our clients would send, our partners would send to us to put in the gifts, right? Like there was always samples being sent of different products that wanted to be in our corporate gifting. And I remember it was like 3 days in, and I remember every single meal being like that box of chocolate. And I'm like, I haven't left the house, I haven't taken care of myself, and so on. And there's only so many days that you could run that
Yeah, like
hard of
getting
a
away
goal.
with that. Yeah.
Right. And that mentality really came from building startups. I worked at early stage startups where we did work 12-hour
Sure.
days like often, and we did work weekends and nights when needed, and we did absolutely so many jobs out of scope of what our job titles and requirements were. So I was just used to that, and I was used to the grind. It was also a different mentality. It was very much like a hustle culture at that
Yeah.
time of
Yeah.
building. So now, for me, every morning I have a routine, every single morning. It starts with our favorite thing, iced coffee. But I really do. I have, to-do lists and emails and check-in and content creation and client bookings and speaking opportunities and all these things. But I don't ever skip out on sleep. If I need a nap in the middle of the day as an entrepreneur, I'm able to do that, right? Like I do
Mhm.
take care of myself in that way. I make sure I get all my steps in. I have, exercise equipment here in my office. I really take it seriously. I got into running, so I love long distance running, which also is a really good break for an
Sure.
entrepreneur because the long distance, and I recommend short distance too. I just personally love long distance because it's like a brain dump, right? It's
Mhm.
just like,
You probably process a lot when you're on your
yeah.
runs. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, all of those habits and rituals and things that are part of my health journey came really from that extreme burnout of, building um, for so long and working every
Mm.
holiday and missing things that were important to me and the people I love. So now I really prioritize those things, and I'm thoughtful in the way I make time for the things I care about.
Yeah, I think it just can also be summed up well now as like thinking about boundaries, like not necessarily having to be the boundary of like saying no to a person or a certain thing, but like just seeing boundaries is honoring commitments to yourself. Like you made this promise to yourself that you're going to do this thing, insert something health related, or even just like as simple as like going to the dentist, right? Like, and actually I have had this conversation often with friends who are like, they've got this great business, but they like will make the like joking comment that they kind of like suck at adulting because
Right.
it's like, hey, I like haven't gotten my car registered. I need to like get a new license. Like, and it makes you kind of laugh because if you've been in the mode that we both have been in, like you're like, yeah, I get that. But it also is really contradictory because it's like all of the skills that you need to build a business, you'd think you'd have like no issue dealing with that kind of stuff. That's simple. It's just easy to put it off, right? And then you start to think that way with your health. And it's like, wait a second, this can't be like, this should be non negotiable here. Right. So I think, though, in my opinion, and I'm going to pose this as my opinion, and I want your reaction rather than me giving this as a question.
Of
You
course.
mentioned hustle culture. And yes, we are in a different time, but I don't necessarily believe that hustle culture is entirely bad. And when you think about your own experience of working for other startups, then building your company, now advising other companies and founders, I believe you had to go through that and you had to experience some of that burnout to a degree to have an insane appreciation for prioritizing your routines. But at the same time, like you also just had to do it to be able to be successful, right? And I think there's a really fine line between that and the grind and like loving that because the fitness industry is very much the same way. Like I do not miss the days where I was waking up multiple days a week at 4 a.m. to go teach a class. However, I'm eternally grateful for that because, in a way, it made it quote unquote easier for me to build my online business because I wasn't afraid to sit on my computer for 12 hours. Do I wish, especially because of what I stand for, that like I got up from my computer and recognized that, hey, you can afford to take 20 minutes for the walk to cook a properly balanced macro meal, especially because I was teaching my clients that? Hell yeah. But I question if we've started to sway a little too far in the direction of like super hardcore self care, that it's kind of like there, if you want this, like you got to grind sometimes too. So, like, where do you fall on that spectrum? I'll ask it that way.
You're 100% right. I would not have the privilege of coaching or, helping my clients today if I didn't grind the way I did
Yeah.
and expect the level of excellence out of myself, right? I think I owe it to my family and all of the opportunities that have ever been given to me as like the first college graduate in my immediate family, and as someone that like really wants to honor my mom and like the work that I do. Like she really
Oh,
wanted to be an
yeah. I
entrepreneur.
literally have chills hearing that.
Yeah, so like for me it was like, hey, if I'm going to do this and give up a very straight and narrow track of like moving up a corporate ladder, even in startups there is
Yeah,
um,
totally.
that, then I have to prove myself and I have to
Mm,
prove that, even if I fail, I tried and I know when to throw in the towel. And, it's not from lack of effort, it's for lack
yes.
of resources, and like just really making sure that that was clear. Um, I always challenge myself now is if you couldn't speak on that topic for more than 30 minutes, why are you doing it? Right. So, like, that's kind of
Ooh,
where
that's
I'm
such
at.
a good lens. I love that.
Yeah. So, that's kind of what I'm at the point of now is I don't take on projects. I don't take on clients. I don't do anything that I wouldn't feel comfortable or confident enough speaking on it for more than 30 minutes or like regurgitating that information to someone else.
Yeah.
Like, because I think that's really what the difference in hustle culture was for me was I wasn't just grinding and doing the things that push my business forward. I was spending so much time on tasks and things
Everything.
that
Yeah.
I was not
The
equipped to
best at.
do, right?
Yeah,
And that goes
sure.
back to that you excel at certain classes in school,
Mhm.
right? And then you don't in other areas. And I felt like, anything that was a little more strategic on the operation side, I was doing for the first time. And I was,
Mhm.
things like this sounds crazy, but even like weighing packages to put certain items together to hit the weight restrictions on
Sure.
delivery times, and like all of that stuff is like, hey, I didn't go into business for this. My real
Mm,
business is the creative side and working with
right.
clients and, the selling and marketing of these products.
Right.
So I try to now navigate that, where if you couldn't speak to something for more than 30 minutes, or you feel, really stuck in something, that's your kind of first flag of, hey, this is maybe an area of outsourcing.
Hmm.
So it's just gotten truly to be able to work smarter and not harder in that way.
Right. Right.
I just didn't I kept my head down for too long and was taking on too many roles of my business, as
Hmm.
where now there's so many more opportunities for fractional work and freelancers
Right.
where you could, incorporate them into your business to support you.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's like such a tricky mentality to get yourself out of, because when you have that, like, okay, I'm doing this for the first time. It's my baby, it's my business. Like, I want to understand all of the roles. There was value in you doing some of those things to be able to teach it to someone else. Like,
Right.
but it is tricky, especially when you feel pressed for cash too. Like that I remember, like, when I finally hired my assistant, who's now been with me for almost 3 years, like, and she was my client for that time as well. I like felt such a breath of fresh air, like, once I got her trained, to be like, the pressure of not having to be the one who's like constantly in my Instagram DM. So, spoiler
Right.
alert for anybody who messages me, yes, there's someone else who's there too, but like, it's allowed me to be a better coach, because then I don't feel this like I need to be over here managing all of this content aspect and DMing, etc. I can dedicate my time to my clients because I know I have the second person who's really supportive of that. But for the longest time, I couldn't let it go because I was like, it
Right.
has to be me, right? Like, so I really, I love your example. I know you're saying it sounds silly, but I love your example of weighing the packages, because that's not silly. That was like necessary for the type of
Right.
business that you built. And I just kind of going in more into this theme around like the type of business that you built, and talking more about your exit and everything. I'd love to know from you, as you look back on making the transition, or like potentially even considering somebody acquiring you, how did that kind of unfold? Like, did you know from your startup experience that, like, once you latched onto this idea, your intent would be to exit, or did it happen almost by accident? Like, where were you kind of at when this started to come together?
Yeah. Well, there's no accidents in entrepreneurship. It's definitely output.
Yeah.
Um, I always said, and I've said this, on other podcasts, so if I sound like a broken record, forgive me. But if I was 90 years old and woke up on my 90th birthday and was still in gifting as an industry, I would have considered that a good life. I would have been like, yep, this is what I want to do. I
Mhm.
really love the technology behind gifting now. And I think that there's so much with AI and the industry, that it's going to help people act on their thoughtfulness. And I'm really
Yeah,
excited
totally.
for, you know, the next 60 years to see that unfold. Um, for me, the origin story was, before I even started my business, I had known one of the five founders of the company that purchased my business, Urban Stems,
Okay.
because I was a power user. When I was at that startup, I ordered flowers all the time.
Yeah.
So
Best
he,
gift. I buy myself
yeah,
flowers every week. Like, that was one of the reasons that I was so excited when I saw you introduce yourself in that Geneva group, because I was like, I love flowers. Like, I was like, oh, I have to talk to her.
yeah. Well, I love flower fans, and I think, um, just the plug, seasonal bouquets right now are beautiful for tablescapes and gifts. So I love this time of year specifically for flowers, because there's so much you could do with it. I think the autumn type flowers are just gorgeous.
Yeah, and the
I
colors. Yeah,
digress
so
into
cute.
flower talk, but I had known one of the founders, and I had kept in touch with him, and before I even launched had said like, hey, I'm going to launch this business. And we just kept in touch throughout the years of just being like, maybe once or twice a year, just remote like followers on Twitter and LinkedIn and so on, like any other business relationship. And we had connected as my business was growing, and he had made an introduction. He was like, we got, a new chief revenue officer over here, blah, blah, blah. Then COVID hit. So all conversations stalled. I never thought it would be an acquisition. And then the conversation picked back up, and I knew right away that they were the right partner. They had the
Cool.
mission of, sending happy and, really bringing joy through gifting, and it just worked out. But I always say that I wasn't in the business to sell. I wasn't in a time of desperation, and COVID, my business was continuing to boom, just like everyone else in
Yeah.
corporate gifting. It was the only way to reach employees, friends, family, clients, was through sending things to
Right.
their
And really know you were thinking of them too, like, especially during
exact.
that time. Yeah.
So, it really was a timing thing. It was the right partner, the right time. And also, you know, I always said, like, if I woke up at 90 and was in corporate gifting or gifting in general, like, I'd be happy. But one thing that I've learned is it's been a huge sacrifice of my personal life, right?
Mhm.
Because I work every holiday and
Right.
every,
Especially like the nature of the type of business for sure.
yeah,
Like this is your craziest time.
right.
Yeah.
So being able to, take a break and say, like, hey, in this chapter, as I am at, my mid 30s and entering what I hope to be would be the next chapter of my life, and, potentially have a family and so on and pursue that,
Mhm.
is I want to be at every Christmas, and I want to celebrate every, Valentine's Day and Mother's Day and all of those holidays, and not be the person behind the scenes making that for everyone
Yeah.
anymore. And the way I get to kind of do both still is through my clients. I am very fortunate that I do work with a handful of clients in the gifting space.
Nice. That's
And
awesome.
yeah, and I still have a million ideas out there. I don't think that I'll be a founder coach forever or a
Mhm.
speaker forever. I think I'll always do this.
Yeah.
But I do think that I'll be a serial entrepreneur and continue to find ideas and problems I want to solve and companies I want to build. So
Mhm.
I kind of love that that chapter ended when it did, and really grateful for the time off that I had to figure out how I was going to fill my cup and support so many other entrepreneurs.
Yeah. So in that time of taking off and taking that break, I'm curious, knowing that you would have been happy being in corporate gifting until 90, what kind of, if any, fears did you have about like now your identity was shifting? This wasn't going to be your everyday. I don't know if you had thoughts about creating your coaching business even before the sale was like officially complete, but was there any part of you that was like maybe just even uncomfortable with the fact that you like didn't have to jump into the next thing? Because the personalities we've been describing for the past 40 minutes, we also have to acknowledge with the hustle culture piece, et cetera, like we have trouble sitting still. So how did that feel for you?
After I took time off, I was able to travel to Greece with a friend and go to Ireland and visit family and do all the things that were like wholesome and really brought me back to like almost like this childlike, like, curiosity for the world and all
Sure.
things. Like, I started to run, I was cooking more, I was doing all of these things that really brought me joy in different ways. I started volunteering a lot, and my coaching business happened truly organically. All different founders were reaching out for projects, and it wasn't until after I ran the New York City Marathon last year, I took time off to train.
Cool.
And after that, January 1st of this year, I decided to take the full swing and be like, this is my full time job. How do I make
Mhm.
a business plan around this being a coaching business? And I'm just finally getting to the point where, um, you know, I realize like this is something that I love and I want to get better at content creation and education and sending out all the things you need to do to build a business
Right.
because I could reach more people.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, not everyone could afford one-to-one coaching and have me on
Uh-huh.
their team to advise. But I'm going to be able to kind of share more in detail
That's
by
exciting.
by
Yeah.
like doing things like this and, creating video content. So, I always talk about imposter syndrome and how I was like completely fearless when I had $5,000 to my name as where I should have been, shit scared. But like, believe it or not, the things that scare me are like things like this, like hold the camera and film a video. And I'm like, oh
Mhm.
gosh, that sounds terrifying of posting something to social media. But I'm like, it's not about me. It's about, helping other, you know, entrepreneurs and future entrepreneurs, set up their business for success.
Yeah. And it's interesting to hear you say that just as like we had this conversation a bit the first time that you and I connected, but I like kind of take for granted that I don't have the imposter syndrome on that side of things because like I actually like that part of business more than anything. Like I love talking about nutrition so much so that because I love talking about it and I love the social media aspect of it and I love the marketing aspect of it, I know that that's a skill set that I want to help other people like, continue to develop the same exact way you're saying like I know this is bigger than me because I know that if I can get past that, I could help even more people. And I love your heart for that and the mission for that because guess what? At the end of the day, like that is going to help you just move past it because it is so much bigger than you. And that's really powerful. But the imposter syndrome piece specifically is so interesting because right now I've kind of been in this mode of being like, I want to tap into this like next iteration of business and take on more of that like business to business type client. And I've noticed that I have imposter syndrome for that because I've been able to create such a structure and system to my nutrition coaching business that now I'm like, okay, wait a second. Like, this is back to the drawing board. This is building something else from scratch. Totally discounting that I built something from scratch already, like saying it out loud right now, it sounds like really irrational, right? But I think that's really interesting. And I appreciate you saying that because little did you know that's like a mirror to me for me to hear that
Right.
be like, hey, like go for it. Like it's okay if you don't know exactly what it looks like that's how I started the Fitness Fix. I didn't know what it was going to look like. And now it's cool that I have this confidence of like, yes, there's stuff in place. Yes, I could literally hand this to somebody else and have them like have the blueprint to be able to do that. And that's really rewarding. And I'm curious for you, as you think about like, okay, maybe I'm not necessarily coaching forever, or you have these ideas of trying to be able to reach more people who can't necessarily afford the one-to-one piece of it or like that kind of advisement from you. Is there like, if you're willing to share, another like completely different business like inside of you that's like maybe it's not corporate gifting but it's like Kelly's next version of like building something like that, some kind of product service from scratch? Like would you do that again?
Yeah. Well, Krista, I love your spirit in saying that too, just to give you some kudos. Like
Thank you.
the one token of a great entrepreneur is constantly finding other problems to solve. And
Mhm.
by building one thing, you find out that, you built so many other things. My corporate gifting days are, done right now. Like I said, I really in this next chapter want to be home for all the holidays and be able to build a business around that goal.
Yeah, and that priority.
Yeah. But when it comes to ideas and products, I'm so lucky. I support a handful of organizations through like pitch competitions and
Oh,
sponsor
cool.
women owned businesses. And like I said, I get to like go see their products in stores and
Yeah, that's so fun.
um yeah, and recently one of my clients have even, been on Shark Tank, right? So like there's so many cool ways that like um, I feel fulfilled through entrepreneurship by
Yeah.
helping in those capacities. Um, but when it comes to ideas, if I were to have capital and, all my ducks in a row and start a new business tomorrow, I do think that it may be in the women's health space. That's something I'm
Cool.
super interested in. Uh, just from going through my own experience and my own journey, navigating late stage endometriosis and having 7 surgeries for it. Right now, the only way to diagnose endometriosis is actually exploratory surgery. And that sounds terrifying to any woman, right?
Of course.
And it is more of a medical thing. And I'm not a doctor. I cannot provide health advice or research to, create a product in that field. But just like I love, supporting running and running organizations and women owned businesses and entrepreneurship, I also really am interested in the women's health space and all of, the products that are coming out there,
Mm-hmm.
like to support that. So I don't know, but if I were to have, like I said, a magic wand and could
It would be that.
start somewhere, it would probably be in that category.
I love that, of course. And hey, listen, like your point about knowing that there's exploratory surgery involved. I have a very good friend who's been on this podcast who has gone through her own experience with that as well. Like had a very serious scare with it last year, but similar situation, multiple surgeries. Um, and she's now seen that like it's made her nutrition coaching business have an even bigger purpose, which I think is so cool that she's chosen to look at it that way, because no exaggeration, like she could have died like with what happened to her. And she was like, I am getting this chance to be able to advocate for more people. But even in my own like day to day of let's call them smaller situations, but like we could do a whole other podcast about this, and maybe we will if you create something like this. But like just like the nature of care, of being able to communicate with your doctor, of what that back and forth looks like, I gotta say is very frustrating. And I say that as somebody who really has been lucky enough to not deal with a major health issue, that I can't even imagine what it feels like when you went through what you did, and making it difficult to just like call your doctor's office and not be able to get them on the phone right away. Like that literally grinds my gears, right? So I think even from like what we were saying about looking for problems and like trying to find solutions, like even if you're not necessarily super versed in like the medical care aspect of it, like there's stuff there to improve and pick apart, you know?
Exactly. And I think you make an excellent point on, the problems and solutions. So many of them are not, um, doctors going out and solving them, or physicians. They're
Right.
really patient focused, right?
Mm-hmm.
I recently watched a pitch competition of a woman that created a product because she was, navigating breast cancer, right? And, had a need, and it was like, wow, I wouldn't have known that from that perspective unless,
Right.
so it really is, there really is a huge opportunity for patients to kind of advocate and solve through different business channels.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm excited to continue to see what you get your hands into next, because it's like, I'm sure you feel this way, but like it's almost like in lots of ways, you've done so much, but everything's also just getting started at the same time. Right. And I think that's like one of the coolest positions to be in for sure.
I agree. I always say that I'm gonna leave the startup world, and then I realize how I'm truly not made for a traditional 9 to 5, not just because
Yeah.
of, my health that doesn't allow for that. My body doesn't show up for me every day. Like
Mm-hmm.
no employer wants someone that is that inconsistent. But I also love that when, I every day is different, and I'm able to just, continue to create and meet and do all of the things that um, really make business and life one, and not feel like, oh, my life is just all work, right? I,
Right.
I think it's really special that I've been able to create a life that many of my colleagues have been friends, right? That
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
say, just like we're
Sure.
going to grab dinner next week, right? Like
Right.
there's so many people that I've met through entrepreneurship that I, now enjoy in my life outside of a 9 to 5, as where like your coworkers you can't pick, right? Like, so
Yeah,
it's really
absolutely.
cool in building that type of community and meeting so many interesting people that you could learn from.
Yeah, you're so right. I've like really learned that for myself this year in particular. Like I knew it, but I didn't feel as like aware of it and embodied in it that like you can still like work and life don't have to be separate, and but if they are connected, it doesn't have to be synonymous with you being a workaholic. Like, and that's something that's actually I think has like really allowed me to have more fun after going through the period of being like I'm going to do all these things to like really grow my business and have the same financial pressures that you were describing of like I got to figure this out. But yeah, I've found like so much more peace and appreciation for what I do, and like confidence in knowing that like I'm not going to wake up tomorrow, my business is going to fall apart, because I carried that fear for a very long time, which like fueled the always
Right.
working all the time. And, I think that you're right. Like that is something that once you get a taste of that, like you want to keep it. But I also really want to highlight, like from a health perspective, and for all of my female listeners, but some of my clients too who listen to this, I want them to hear again what you just said about knowing that your body doesn't show up for you the same way every single day. Because I give you a ton of credit for, and I'm sure this took work, but it sounds like the way you said that, not judging yourself for that reason. Like, I really respect that you were able to just say that out loud, because if there's one thing that I want a lot of my clients, like even down to the whole, I stepped on the scale, I don't like the number, that makes me frustrated. Now I'm judging. Like, we practicing neutrality there is important, but it's not perfect. And I don't expect myself included, like to be like, so like, oh, it's just a number. Like, there's always a part of us that might not believe that. But I think what you just stated, the way you said it was so cool. Like, I know that my body doesn't show up the same way every day, and that's all right. And like, good for you for taking that perspective on and then being like, well, how can I continue to create the best life ever rather than look at that as a limitation? So I wonder, like, what did it take for you to be able to get to that place? Because I imagine you didn't always feel that way.
Yeah, I think I really had to start saying no, and like, there's probably full transparency, there's probably like 4 days a month. Not, they could be async, but
Yeah.
for women that have severe endometriosis, and not just like I have it on my other organs, right? So I have some kidney issues and liver issues, like all connected to this
Yeah.
disease. So, if it is not a wedding or a funeral or some type of absolute must be at on those days, I no longer work through pain. I
Good for
refuse,
you.
because on the days that I am healthy and happy, I will just work double. And that's something that an employer could never say to me, because I can't predict when those 4 days are going
Are
to
going to
be.
happen.
And
Sure.
they're not going to be they're not going to be together all the time, like that's just not how my body works. So, truly, I won't show up for pain days. Another thing that I won't do is, I can't fly certain times. And I have to be flaky. If I wake up that morning and I am too sick to fly, I have to say I'm too sick to fly. So I'm very mindful of that with my travel and my business travel of, hey, I might be too sick today to do that. And maybe I'll feel better tomorrow and get on a plane, maybe not. But I buy a lot of insurance for things like flights and races. Like I said, I do a
Yeah.
lot of um, running races and things like that. But it is something that I have the privilege of doing. But I know that in my 20s, I didn't, right? I
Mhm.
had to show up to work a 9 to 5, no matter what, even if I
Right.
was, sick in my chair. And that's not something that is cohesive. Like, I will do anything, truly. Like, you could find, I still Poshmark, right? I make a few $1,000s a year on Poshmark. I
Yeah.
Poshmark my clothes. I'll find ways to make money online before I sit through pain for someone else.
Yeah. That's really empowering. And I really appreciate that you've allowed yourself and like challenged yourself by going through the grind to be able to get to a place where like you can now like uphold that and live that standard every single day and just like own it, right? Like I know you were like saying like, hey, I might have to be flaky. Like that doesn't make you a bad person. The same way that you can say to yourself, like going back to my scale example, like just because you don't like the number doesn't make you a bad person, right? Like it's honoring yourself, like respecting yourself with the process, saying to yourself, like, you're also not going to let that sideline you completely. You could really easily sit here and be like, well, based on all of these experiences I've had with my health, why the heck would I do a race? Like, whereas you're looking at it and just saying, cool, this is why insurance exists. I'm proud of my effort and myself for the fact that I can afford to think about it that way. And then you're going to continue to live your best life that way. So I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited to hear, that there are other women out there with my condition and similar situations that, some are actresses, some are Broadway actresses, all different types of careers where they are now, working with their employers for specific care. And
Yeah. And support.
I really,
That's awesome.
I think there's like, a lot of opportunity for me to do that in the entrepreneur space. And, many women in my support group and endo groups that I'm in actually have said, hey, I'm going to lose my job from the amount of days
Yeah,
that
I
really
believe it.
off. So they're looking now for how do I earn a living around my
Yeah,
conditions.
it's such a necessity at that point.
Right. So that's something that, again, I will always advocate for is if, just like the educational system didn't work for me in the way it should have, right? Like, of like, hey, you're technically a C student because you get A's and D's. Like,
Yeah.
there was something wrong in that spectrum, right?
Right.
Like,
Sure.
um, it's the same way in, a 9 to 5. It doesn't work for everyone. And, how do I meet someone where they are so that they can do their best work? And I think that's what the future of work is going to be. And if employment doesn't allow for, women like myself and other conditions, then entrepreneurship is going to be the answer to that. And like I always say, entrepreneurship is for everyone.
Yeah.
So
So good. I
yeah.
love it. Yeah. I didn't even know that part about your story from the first time we spoke. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And I, again, just like love that perspective. And I I know we're recording this on a Friday afternoon, so I want to be
Yeah.
respectful of your time and just give you one last question to leave the listeners to this with, kind of similar to how we started the show, but because we covered a lot and because we went in a few different directions, if there is only one message that you could leave somebody with, what would it be?
I would say just start. Truly just start. It sounds so scary and so silly to be scared to do something because you don't get a second chance. And I'll just give this one example. I knew at the age of 22 that I wanted to run the New York City Marathon. And I did not become a runner until after my surgeries at age 31. And I didn't end up running the marathon until 34. And I did it scared. I was undertrained. I knew that it was going to take me all day to do, like 7+ hours. And I was okay because I knew that I wanted to do that. And I know that every time I do it, in the future, I'll probably do it better in less time
Yeah.
and so on. And I
Hell
learned
yeah.
so much. But just start and do it scared because that has, if I didn't try the marathon, if I didn't grow a business and quit my job and do that, I wouldn't have had all of these experiences. And I always say that like I've been waiting around for like my life to start, and I don't want to feel that way. I want to be able to say that like if anything happened, I left it out all on the table. And I truly do that with like travel traveling and bucket list goals all the time. So do it scared, start. That's my best advice. If you have a big goal like that, it shouldn't take 12 years to fight the fear and do it. Just really go after it, because unfortunately we only get one whack at life.
Yeah. I'll expand on that by saying there's like a phrase that I've started to live by in the last 4 years, especially in the last like 12 months, but in the last 4 years for sure, since like making big personal life decisions, walking away from an engagement, moving, all of it. I trust the timing of my life as like a mantra, but I'm bringing it up in this context because your point of saying like, don't sit on the sidelines. I believe it's much easier to believe in the power of I trust the timing of my life when you're like you and you actually go after stuff. Like I have so much more confidence in trusting the timing of all things in my life because I do wake up every day. And even if it's not right away, like I'm so sure I'm eventually going to get to the thing I'm afraid of. So I have I feel a lot of power in making that statement as an affirmation versus somebody who does maybe feel like they're sitting on the sidelines. Like if you want to believe that about yourself, like go for it and go do it. So I appreciate you so much. And you're right. It's so true. If you didn't have half the experiences you did, if I didn't, we wouldn't even be sitting here right now having this conversation. That's the coolest part about podcasting. I literally said this to my last guest, not even last week, that just like the fact that we can like sit here for an hour, not be on our phones, not look at anything else, the level of conversation that you get from that to me is just so gratifying. And for you saying you could have been corporate gifting till 90, I could say I could podcast till 90 and like really, really look forward to it. Like this has truly been the highlight of my week. And thank you so much. And I'm excited for our friendship to continue to grow too. So as a final question, if anybody wants to connect with you, if they want to stay in touch, I know you're big on LinkedIn, and share whatever platforms you want and we'll link them all down in the show notes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for such an amazing conversation and constantly inspiring me and motivating me to continue to get up from my desk and eat good and sleep good and be well. I love all the work you're doing, Krista.
Thank you.
I'm just so thankful to have the conversation today. If anyone's interested in connecting, like you said, I am available on LinkedIn under Kelly Ann Parker, and I offer free consults for anyone that has any question at all about entrepreneurship, whether you have a business or want to start a business. I'm open to chatting. My calendar is public.
Awesome.
So that is available to everyone.
Amazing. Well, thank you again. And for everybody who tuned in today, you guys know the deal. If you got anything out of this conversation, and how could you not have, share it with somebody. Maybe it will spark inspiration for you and like someone else you might have a business idea with, right? Who knows? And I love the fact that this podcast and this one chat could have that impact. And from wherever you're listening from, as always, we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will catch you guys next week. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you.